Welcome to English Total Grammar Lessons. Chapter 21, The Passive. Today we're going to talk about the passive and how you can use it in conversation. Before we start with the lesson, consider subscribing to our channel. We upload content to help you improve your English every week. Okay, let's begin. The passive in English can be used to describe actions in which the focus is on what is done, not on the subject. Look at these examples to see how this works.
Our website was designed by an expert.
The new product will be presented today.
Cool, let's move on. Before we have a look at passive sentences, let's have a quick look at what an active sentence is. Understanding the difference between active and passive is key. This is the structure for an active sentence. First, there's the subject followed by the verb and then the object. This is the way sentences in English are usually formed. In case you're wondering what the object of a sentence is, the object is defined as the thing that receives the action expressed by the verb. Here are two examples.
Tim designs websites.
Tim will design our website.
In these two cases, the object is the website Tim designs. This is the structure for a passive sentence. First, there's the object, followed by the verb to be, and the verb in participle form. Notice that, if necessary, you can add the subject or the agent using the word by. Here are two examples.
The website is designed by Tim.
Our website will be designed by Tim.
As you can see, one example is present, the other is future. The examples on the left are active, whereas the examples on the right are the passive versions, where the focus is on what is done. Let's take a more detailed look at how passive sentences can be formed. Again, this is the structure for the passive, as we said in the previous section. It's basically the object followed by the verb to be, and finally the main verb in participle form. Look at these examples.
The rooms are cleaned every day. The rooms were cleaned yesterday. The rooms will be cleaned tomorrow. The rooms have been cleaned completely. The rooms are being cleaned now.
As you can see, the only thing that changes is the form of the verb to be. The rest of the sentence stays the same. You can basically change the verb to be to create passive sentences in any tense. Easy, right? Let's move on to question formation. This is the structure for questions in the passive voice. You start with the verb to be, followed by the object and the main verb in participle form. Take a close look at these examples.
Are the rooms cleaned every day? Were the rooms cleaned yesterday? Will the rooms be cleaned tomorrow? Have the rooms been cleaned completely? Are the rooms being cleaned now?
As pointed out in the previous section, you can use the verb to be to create passive questions in present, past, future, or any other tense. It's actually quite simple if you think about it. Finally, let's have a look at the use of the word by in passive sentences. You don't usually say who completes the action expressed by the main verb. However, you can do it by adding by, followed by the agent, or the person or people who complete any given action, as expressed by a verb. Here's one example.
The room was painted by me. I painted the room.
Easy enough, don't you think? Okay, time to recap. Today you have learned how to form passive sentences and how you can use the passive in conversation to express different ideas. Remember that while the active voice emphasizes the doer of the action, the passive voice focuses on what was done, often omitting or downplaying the doer. Compare these ideas. This makes it quite common in work settings, for instance, as the passive is more impersonal. Okay, lesson over. We hope this was useful. Check out the quick test posted in the comment section below. Give us a like or leave us a comment. We really appreciate feedback. Thanks for watching. This is the end of Chapter 21.